Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Last August, my boyfriend and I moved into this older apartment complex. The building had character, which is a nice way of saying the floors creaked like crazy and the walls were thin. Our lease specifically said that we had to cover 90% of any room with carpet or rugs, except for the bathroom and kitchen, to help with noise issues. We took this seriously because we're not jerks who want to disturb our neighbors. The thing is, our apartment used to be a college dorm, so it already had this super thin, pathetic excuse for carpet that barely covered the floors. To be extra considerate, we went out and bought additional area rugs to put down everywhere. We figured better safe than sorry, right? For about a month, everything was peaceful. We settled into our routines, got to know the building, and thought we'd found a nice quiet place to call home. Then she moved in. The woman who moved into the apartment directly below us seemed normal at first. We'd see her in the hallway sometimes and exchange polite nods. I even thought we might become friendly neighbors. Boy, was I wrong. The first incident happened on a night when we were up late in our living room. It was just past midnight, and we were watching a movie quietly. Suddenly, we heard this loud banging coming from below us. It startled us both, and we quickly realized it was coming from her ceiling, which was our floor. She was literally hitting her ceiling to get our attention. My boyfriend asked what the hell that was, and I told him I thought it was a neighbor downstairs wanting us to be quieter. He pointed out that we were barely making any noise though. We turned the volume down on the television and tried to be even more careful about our movements. We figured she was probably trying to sleep and we'd accidentally disturbed her. Fair enough, we thought. We could work with that. The second time it happened, we had just gotten back from the airport around 10 p.m. We were tired from traveling and just wanted to get inside and relax. When we were pulling our luggage up the stairs, she came storming out of her apartment and started banging on our door. When I opened it, she didn't even give me a chance to speak. She accused us of making all the noise up there, saying she knew it was us and not some cat or whatever else we wanted to blame it on. Then she added that we should know she didn't live alone. I tried to apologize and explained that we had just gotten back from a trip and were trying to be quiet. I asked what specific noise she was talking about. She told me not to play dumb with her and said she could hear everything we did up there. Before I could respond, she turned around and went back to her apartment, slamming her door behind her. My boyfriend and I looked at each other, completely confused. We hadn't been making excessive noise, and her comment about not living alone seemed random and vaguely threatening. We decided to be extra careful about noise from then on. We started going to bed earlier, taking our shoes off when we got inside, and being mindful of every step we took. But no matter what we did, the banging continued. It became obvious that she was banging on her ceiling every single time we moved around our apartment. We go to bed at 10 at night, bang. We'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning for work, bang. We'd just be sitting on the couch and I'd get up to grab some snacks from the kitchen, bang, bang, bang. This went on for months. We tried everything we could think of to minimize noise, but nothing satisfied her. We started to realize that this woman had unrealistic expectations about apartment living. Around Christmas, she knocked on our door again. This time my boyfriend answered, and I had the presence of mind to start recording the conversation on my phone. She told us we needed to stop following her around her apartment. My boyfriend asked what she was talking about, saying we didn't even know her. She said we were lying, claiming she could hear us walking around up there and following her every move. She accused us of stalking her. My boyfriend told her she sounded crazy and that we had no interest in her whatsoever. We were just living our lives in our own apartment. She reminded us again that she wasn't alone down there and had people who could deal with us. When my boyfriend asked if she was threatening us, she told us to take it however we wanted. The whole conversation was bizarre and concerning. When she finally left, we called our landlord and the building superintendent to report what was happening. They were both sympathetic and told us that we had every right to walk around our own apartment during reasonable hours. By this point, we were getting fed up with her harassment. We decided to start fighting back. Every time she banged on our floor, we'd stomp back. It became a weird game between us and her. At least it made us feel like we weren't just taking her abuse lying down. Then the pandemic hit, and our town was one of the first in the country to go into lockdown. Those early days of quarantine were stressful for everyone, and it seemed like our downstairs neighbor completely lost whatever sanity she had left. We're naturally early risers, even on weekends. One Sunday morning, we woke up around 7 and decided to have a lazy morning at home. We made some coffee, sat on the couch, and were just quietly enjoying our morning. We weren't even really moving around much until about 11. That's when she completely lost it. It sounded like she was running back and forth in her apartment, banging on her ceiling so hard that we thought she might actually damage it. I could hear what sounded like muffled screaming coming from below us. The noise was so intense that our 60-pound dog started getting nervous and pacing around. We had plans to go out that day, so we tried to ignore her tantrum and started getting ready to leave. When we headed toward the door, it became clear that she had been waiting for us. She stepped out of her apartment just when we reached the landing between our floors. I was carrying our dog because he gets anxious on the stairs, and my boyfriend was behind me with our things. She positioned herself right in our path, blocking our way down. She demanded that I tell my boyfriend to cut it out right now. I asked what she wanted him to cut out walking around our own apartment. I pointed out that she was banging on the ceiling because of me and my dog moving around. Not just him. She said she didn't want to hear my excuses anymore and that this had to stop now. My boyfriend finally made it down to where we were standing and she started yelling at him. To his credit, he stayed calm. He called her a crazy lady and said we weren't dealing with this anymore. He walked right past her toward the exit, completely ignoring her while she continued shouting. I tried to follow him, but she stepped closer to me, getting right in my face. She told me she was serious and that this was done. No more games. I asked what exactly she wanted us to do, crawl around our apartment. I reminded her that we had a big dog and we were just living normally up there. She said she didn't care about my excuses and reminded me again that she didn't live alone down there. I pointed out that neither did I, gesturing to my boyfriend. I told her that was like the 4th time she'd said that and it was starting to sound like a threat. When I suggested it sounded like a threat, she said fine, it was a threat. I told her I was calling the cops right now. She said good, she was calling them too. We both pulled at our phones and called the police. I was shaking with anger, but I felt confident that we were in the right. We waited outside the building for the officers to arrive. When the police showed up, they talked to her first. I could see her gesturing wildly and pointing up at our apartment. After about 10 minutes, they came over to speak with us. The officer said they needed to hear our side of what had been going on. I told them everything. The months of harassment, the constant banging, her threats, her claims that we were stalking her. I showed them the recording I'd made of our previous conversation where she'd made similar threats. My boyfriend explained that we were just trying to live in our apartment peacefully and had done everything we could to minimize noise, but she complained no matter what we did. The officer told us that walking around our apartment at 11 in the morning on a Sunday was perfectly reasonable and wasn't a noise violation by any stretch. The officers explained that this was primarily a civil matter that needed to be resolved through our landlord, but they made it very clear to both of us that she was not allowed to continue knocking on our door or banging on our ceiling. One officer warned that if they had to come back for this issue, someone might end up getting cited for harassment or disturbing the peace. For a few nights after that, she retaliated by banging on our floor at 1:30 in the morning, clearly trying to wake us up out of spite. We documented every incident and reported it to our landlord again. That's when we decided to get strategic. We reached out to the people who lived in the apartment below her and told them what had been happening. Turns out they'd been hearing the constant banging the entire time and had no idea what was causing it. They thought maybe she had a weird exercise routine or was doing construction work. One neighbor was shocked that that's what the noise had been, saying they heard her banging on something for hours every day. Another neighbor admitted they were starting to think she was losing her mind down there. Now that they understood what was happening, they also started reporting her to the landlord. Suddenly, it wasn't just us complaining about her behavior. Multiple tenants were documenting her harassment and noise violations. The landlord finally took action. He called her in for a meeting and made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and violated her lease agreement. The banging stopped almost right away after that. A few weeks later, we found out that her lease wouldn't be renewed when it expired at the end of the year. Apparently, the landlord had received complaints about her from other neighbors too, not just us. She had a history of harassing people and making unreasonable demands. The day she moved out was one of the best days we'd had in months. We watched from our window while she loaded her stuff into a moving truck, and we might have celebrated with a bottle of wine that night. After she left, we realized just how quiet our apartment actually was. The new people who moved in below us have never once complained about noise. We've even talked to them a few times, and they've mentioned how peaceful the building is. We ended up staying in that apartment for another year and a half with no issues whatsoever. It really drove home the point that the problem was never us or our noise level. The problem was her unrealistic expectations and entitled attitude. My wife and I had been planning this wedding for over a year. We decided on a tropical location because we wanted something intimate and special. 20 of our closest friends and family members were coming with us to celebrate. Since we had such a large group booking, the airline surprised us with free upgrades to first class. My wife and I were assigned seats A and B in row 4, window and aisle. We were excited about starting our honeymoon in style. When we boarded the plane, I immediately noticed there was a problem. A couple was sitting in our seats, already settled in with their bags stored above. I double-checked our boarding passes to make sure we were in the right place. I politely told them that I thought they might be in our seats. The woman looked up at me with an annoyed expression and said no, that these were their seats and they got there first. Her husband nodded along, acting like possession was 9/10 of the law or something. I asked them to check their boarding passes since our tickets clearly showed A and B, row 4. Karen snapped back that she didn't care what our tickets said and they weren't moving. Who does that? I didn't want to cause a scene, especially not before my wedding, so I flagged down a flight attendant. The flight attendant asked what the problem was, and I explained that these passengers were in our assigned seats while showing her our boarding passes. She looked at their tickets and then ours. The flight attendant told them they were actually assigned to row 1, seats C and D, and needed to move to their correct seats. Karen refused again, saying they weren't moving because they liked these seats better. The flight attendant apologized but said they didn't have a choice in the matter since we had the proper assignment for these seats. Karen complained that this was ridiculous because they got there first. Her husband chimed in too, getting increasingly rude with the flight attendant. I could see this was going nowhere fast, and honestly, I just wanted to get to our wedding destination without any more drama. I told them that if they wanted these seats so badly, we would just switch with them since their seats were probably fine too. The flight attendant looked surprised but relieved and asked if I was sure, since we didn't have to do that. I said it was fine because these were free upgrades anyway, and we were just happy to be in first class. Karen and her husband immediately agreed to the swap. The flight attendant made sure everyone understood we were officially switching seat assignments, and she even brought my wife and me a glass of champagne. We settled into row 1, seats C and D. They were actually pretty comfortable, and we were still in first class, so no complaints from us. The whole thing seemed resolved. About 5 minutes later, another couple boarded the plane and headed straight for our original seats, the ones Karen and her husband were now occupying. The new passenger told them they were in their seats. I watched from my new seat. Turns out the airline had double booked our original seats. The couple who just boarded had actually paid full price for their first class tickets, while Karen and her husband were part of a group package with free upgrades just like us. The flight attendant came over again and explained the situation. She told Karen and her husband that they needed to move to their originally assigned seats since the new couple had paid for these specific seats. Karen complained that they had just gotten settled, but the flight attendant said she understood but these passengers had paid for those specific seats. After more arguing, Karen and her husband reluctantly agreed to move. Here's where it gets interesting. First class was completely full at this point. I was wondering where they thought they were going to sit. They started moving their bags to the overhead compartments above our seats in row 1. The flight attendant stopped them and told them to hold on. She explained that they had officially swapped seats with us, so their seats were now in coach. Karen asked what she meant by coach, and the flight attendant explained that they were originally assigned to row 1, but they had traded those seats. Since first class was full, they would need to take the available seats in economy. Karen started screaming at the top of her lungs about how unfair this was. Her husband joined in, calling the flight attendant incompetent and demanding to speak to the captain. The flight attendant kept her cool and actually called the captain over. When he arrived, he laid down the law and told them they had two choices: take the available seats in coach or get off the plane and take the next flight. Karen was literally bawling at this point, making this horrible wailing sound. They gathered their stuff and trudged back to economy class. The woman was crying so loudly that everyone in first class was staring. Things settled down. My wife and I enjoyed the rest of our flight to our wedding destination. We were having drinks, watching movies, just relaxing and talking about our upcoming ceremony. About 2 or 3 hours into the flight, I was taking a nap when I felt someone grabbing my arm and trying to pull me out of my seat. I woke up confused and saw this older man trying to physically drag me up. I asked him what he was doing, and he yelled that these were his daughter's seats and that we had stolen them. I'm a pretty big guy, and this man was much smaller and clearly drunk. It didn't take much effort to stay in my seat, but I stood up just to make sure he couldn't try anything else. I told him we didn't steal anything and that we had switched seats with his daughter. He called me a liar. This drunk old fool actually threw a punch at me. It was pathetic, barely grazed my arm. But you don't throw punches on airplanes. Almost immediately, a man I assumed was an air marshal appeared and told the old guy he needed to come with him right now. The air marshal dragged him back to coach while he was still yelling about how we stole his daughter's seats. Things were quiet for about 30 minutes before Karen came storming into first class again. She started screaming at the flight attendant that we had ruined their trip and it was all her fault. She was actually trying to get physical with the flight attendant. The same air marshal came back and dragged her away too. At this point, other passengers were recording with their phones and shaking their heads. The rest of the flight was peaceful. When we landed, the captain announced that all passengers should remain seated. A team of police officers boarded the plane and walked straight back to coach. A few minutes later, they escorted Karen and her father off the plane in handcuffs. We ended up staying at the same resort as their group. One of our wedding guests ran into one of their family members at the hotel bar the next day. Apparently, Karen and her father spent the first 3 days of their vacation in a local jail. I've been a registered nurse for about 5 years now. Hospital patients, demanding families, stressed doctors, you name it. But nothing prepared me for what happened at the nursing convention in 2013. Every year, our nursing council puts together this 3-day convention where nurses from all over the country gathered to share research and basically take a mini vacation. They rotated between different cities, always somewhere nice and touristy around mid-May. It's pretty great. You get to present your work, learn from others, and explore a new place. For the past 2 years, my team and I have been working on this research project about patient education and training methods. We'd put in countless hours after our shifts, weekends, you name it. When it came time to present at the convention, somehow I got volunteered to be the one standing up there in front of everyone. I applied for a presentation slot and got scheduled for early morning on the first day. The convention was being held at this fancy hotel in a gorgeous tourist city. Being a nurse doesn't exactly make you rich, so while the convention was at this upscale place, I booked myself into a budget hotel a few blocks away. I figured I'd save some money and still get to enjoy the city. The morning of my presentation, I put on my best dark blue business suit and tie, grabbed my laptop with all my research, and headed over to the fancy hotel. The presentation went well, no technical difficulties, good questions from the audience, the whole thing. I was pretty proud of how it turned out. After wrapping up, I ran into this classmate from nursing school. We hadn't seen each other in ages, so we decided to catch up over coffee. She wanted to stick around for another presentation later in the day, so we found a spot on the hotel's cafe patio. It was this beautiful outdoor area with tables scattered around, perfect for relaxing in the sunshine. We ordered our drinks and settled in for a good gossip session about work, mutual friends, all that stuff. The patio was getting busier when more convention attendees showed up, mostly student nurses and other presenters like myself. The servers were running around trying to keep up with everyone. I was mid-sentence, telling my friend about this ridiculous patient I'd had last week, when suddenly this shadow fell over our table. I looked up to see this woman standing there, and she looked like she'd stepped out of some entitled person manual. The haircut, you know the one. Expensive clothes that somehow looked cheap on her, and this expression like the world owed her everything. She rudely interrupted our conversation to get my attention. I looked around, confused about why she was addressing me. She then complained loudly that she and her friends had been waiting for someone to take their order for 5 whole minutes. She gestured dramatically toward a table where 2 other women were sitting, both looking equally impatient and entitled. I asked her what that had to do with me. I didn't understand why she was telling me this. She then ordered me to get off my break and come take their order immediately. That's when it clicked. She thought I worked there. I told her plainly that I didn't work at the hotel. This woman's face turned red, and she leaned down until she was inches from my face. She called me a peon and declared that they were paying customers who deserved service. She screamed that my break was over and I needed to do as I was told. Before I could even react, she swept her arm across our table like some deranged tornado. Coffee cups went flying, water glasses crashed to the ground, and liquid went everywhere, including all over my laptop bag that was sitting next to the table. I shot up from my chair. I'm not exactly small, 6'4" to be precise, and this woman was maybe 5'6" even with her ridiculous heels. The height difference was pretty dramatic. I told her that I didn't work there, and even if I did, I wouldn't serve people with her nasty attitude. I also warned her that if something happened to my laptop, she'd be paying for it. She got even angrier and demanded to know if I dared to threaten her. She asked if I knew who she was, like that was supposed to mean something. I told her I didn't know and didn't care. I called her an entitled witch, which really set her off. By now, we'd attracted quite the audience. People were stopping their conversations to stare, phones were coming out, and one of the actual servers made their way over. You could tell immediately who worked there and who didn't. The staff wore black pants, white shirts, and black aprons. I was standing there in a full business suit. The server asked what was happening. Karen immediately accused me of being a colleague who was refusing to take their order and threatening her. The server looked me up and down, taking in my suit and tie, and calmly explained to Karen that I didn't work there and was a customer. But Karen wasn't having it. She kept ranting about disrespectful employees and demanding to speak to a manager. She got her wish. Within minutes, both a manager and hotel security showed up. The manager asked someone to explain what had happened. I jumped in before Karen could start her sob story. I explained that this woman had insulted me, deliberately spilled coffee on me and my personal belongings, and had even tried to attack me. I told them I wanted to press charges. The word charges sent Karen into orbit. She started screaming about discrimination against foreign tourists, threatening to sue me, the hotel, probably the entire city. She went on about how we should respect our betters and how this was all some conspiracy against people like her. The manager looked at the mess on the ground, the soaked table, and my dripping laptop bag. Security was already moving in Karen's direction. The manager told Karen she needed to leave the premises immediately. She protested that she was a paying guest, but the manager told her that she wasn't anymore. They escorted her and her friends right out of there. The other guests on the patio started clapping. My classmate was sitting there with her mouth hanging open, trying to process what had just happened. The real damage became clear when I checked my laptop. Coffee had poured right through a slightly open zipper in my bag and fried the whole thing. All my research, my presentation files, everything was gone. I was devastated. But the hotel manager felt terrible about what had happened. He calmed my friends and my drinks, had staff clean up the mess, and offered me something I never expected: a full paid weekend stay at the hotel whenever I wanted to come back. Not just any room either, but one of their suites. About a year later came the satisfying part. My lawyer had been working on the case, and we reached a settlement. Karen ended up paying me €3,500 for the laptop, emotional distress, and legal fees. She was some sort of wealthy tourist who thought money meant she could treat people however she wanted. I used part of that settlement money to buy a much better laptop than the one she'd destroyed. And that free weekend at the hotel, I went back 6 months later with my girlfriend, and we had an amazing time. The staff remembered me and treated us like royalty. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.